The Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, formerly known as Western State Hospital, is a Kirkbride building that housed the mentally ill from 1864 to 1994. In 2007, it was privately purchased and has become a museum or historic location and ghost hunting spot. It has a most unpleasant and dark history that I've regaled to thousands of people, and it pains me to be an expert on the subject. In 2021, I retired from my position as a guide and ghost hunt event manager under severe burnout. After all that I experienced there, it solidified in my mind that paranormal things that defy rational explanation do indeed happen, and certain phenomena are absolutely real, electronic voice phenomenon especially. It's pretty much October now, and I'm feeling a little spooky, so here are a couple of strange things that I've experienced in my time there. So one evening, while training for the job, I was on the first floor with a couple of co-workers while everyone else was touring upstairs. We were just kind of killing time, quietly observing the area. Light from outside was coming in through the windows, casting on the inner hall's wall. And in that light, I watched the perfect silhouette of a man from head to hip walk through that light from left to right. I said something about it, and the three of us watched as an arm and hand moved into the light from the right side. I immediately ran into the room and began looking out of the window for someone outside, but there was no one there. At that time, the realization that from the ground to the bottom of the window is like 7 feet didn't even occur to me. But I will never forget the crisp, clear silhouette shape for as long as I live. But we would run experiments too with a spirit box. It sort of rapidly scans radio frequencies and are believed to be communication devices. One person would use one with the noise-cancelling earbuds. All they're able to hear is the radio static and blips of a few random stations. And when they hear a word or a phrase, they are to say it out loud. I always liked this role in the experiment too. Now one evening, my co-worker and I ran one of these experiments in a notorious room where a murder in 1987 took place. For 10 minutes, I sat and listened to nothing but radio static through the spirit box. No blips of the radio, nothing except the sound of static. I was starting to get bored, in fact, when I heard a woman's voice say evil. So I spoke up and repeated the word evil. Next thing I know, my co-worker is shining her flashlight in my face to get my attention. I pull out the earbud and she was practically frantic, saying, "It's time to go now." So we haul butt out of the room, down the hall, down the next hall to the center section before she would even tell me what happened. While I was hearing nothing but static, she said that she kept hearing what sounded like someone shuffling their feet and walking around just outside of the door. She said that she spoke up and asked, "Whoever is out in the hallway, are they nice?" That was when I spoke out and said evil. In the wee hours one night as well, we figured that it would be cool to see what would happen if we shut all the doors of the ward. And one of the doors, as I was closing it, the knob twisted in my hand. I was not twisting the doorknob at all, and it was forcibly pulled closed. I stood there for several moments, opening and closing that door, trying to replicate what had just happened, trying to explain it. Finally, the person with me was like, "What are you doing?" It was really weird, I admit, but I'd never felt invisible forces like that before. I had 3 people spend the night one night too, and they had thermal imaging video. They set it up, pointing down the hall where we would all watch on a tablet. We thought that it would be interesting to leave a device at the far end of the hall that would alarm if the field around it was disturbed. As one of the dudes walked down the hall to put it there, we could see his form on the thermal imaging, clearly human-shaped in colors representing heat and warmth and all that. When he walked by one of those doorways about a 4th way down the ward, the shape of a head, neck, shoulders, and upper body of a person, in colors indicating cooler temperatures, peeked out as he walked by, like someone popped out of the room for a sec as he walked by to check him out. I've never seen anything like it, and I won't forget it, and would give my left testicle, if I had one, for a copy of that footage. That happened a lot too, a guest capturing something far out and not sending a copy to us, which was really annoying, but I did get to see a lot, which I'm thankful for. Anyway, I want to end this by sharing something that absolutely changed me and that I still don't understand. I remember the exact night and time of those occurrences too. That's how profound and somewhat unsettling they were. June 3rd and June 4th of 2017 at 3:40 in the morning. So, June 3rd. After an hour or so of hearing females' voices, one instance even sounded like she had said my name, as well as banging around and footsteps, literally running sounds on that hardwood floor towards us, I sat quietly on the floor with a group. I started to feel dizzy, lightheaded and gross. I told myself that it was my imagination and that I would be fine. A few minutes later, I started to feel this intense burning sensation on my lower back, just to the right of my spine. Again, I told myself that it was all just my imagination. The burning sensation kept amping up though, getting worse and worse. I told myself that I didn't want to be that guy and say anything in front of these people, you know. Finally, though, it got to the point where I just had to say something. I asked my co-worker with us if there was anything there. She was like, "Oh my goodness, there on my lower back, just to the right of my spine, was a mark that looked like a burn or an abrasion, about 3 to 4 inches long and about 1 inch wide." Now, I'd seen other such claims made by visitors of scratch marks and the like, often written them off, and the marks were always gone within an hour at most. I had visible marking on my back for almost a week though. My nerves there, to this very day, often feel very weird too. Sometimes chilled, or sometimes like a skin soreness or something. Strangely as well, especially when I think about the experience. June 4th, some part of the building, some time of night, because I just can't get enough right, I noticed that my voice recorder ran out of memory. So I'm holding it in my right hand, using the flashlight in my left so I could see what I was doing. And suddenly, I feel a burning sensation on the underside of my right forearm. I did a what the heck and shifted my flashlight to it. The person beside me and I watched as 3 welts began to appear down my arm. Needless to say, that blew my mind. It was one thing to see marks like that. It was a whole other to watch it as it happens on your own skin. And like the majority of other instances that I'd heard about regarding these welts, those marks were gone within about 10 to 15 minutes, no lasting effects. Scared would probably be the wrong word for this, but I have none to describe my mind frame around these events. I took a week off from work after it to try and just process it all, and was nervous being in that hallway for the rest of that summer. Like I said, I still don't know what to think about all this or believe, but I know what happened. I've got enough stories of experiences to probably fill a book at this point, but I'll leave you with these for now, and I'll add a final note about how constantly poking around in the dark and talking about past true horrors of human experiences day in and day out truly takes a bit of a toll spiritually and emotionally on you. Since my resignation, my mental health and overall level of happiness has greatly improved. I used to tell people for a while afterwards that it felt like I'd gotten out of a toxic relationship with that place. So it was probably for the best that I left, but I must admit, I'm still curious about that place. Still wonder if things are going on. When I was about 5 or 6 years old, I was brought into a hospital due to a serious infection and a large cut on my knee. Since I wasn't able to walk without taking a 30-minute break every 10 minutes, I was mostly in the room that I was given. Back then, I didn't really have a good relationship with my sister, so she barely stayed in my room. This was eventually where the problem started. On about my 3rd night of my hospitalization is when I started experiencing extreme paranoia every time that I was the only one in the room. For some reason, I always thought that someone was staring at me from the bathroom doorframe, and it was the 6th night that had confirmed my fears. My sister had been watching me when my mum was at work for a few hours. Since it was her fault, I even got the infection, I didn't talk to her and just wanted to sleep. When I woke up, the TV was off. The only light were the buttons near my bed and on my bed, and my sister was gone. I couldn't really see in the dark that well, but all of a sudden I noticed a silhouette in the doorway of the bathroom. I knew that it wasn't sleep paralysis too, because I could move just fine. So, being prone to freezing up when scared, I didn't move though. The silhouette was shaped in the form of a tall figure, and I could barely make out something was there, but there was definitely something. For what felt like hours too, that thing just stood there, and I stared at it, and I could see it more and more as my eyes adjusted to the dark that there was somebody there. And after a while, I just tried to ignore it, I guess, and I went back to sleep. And I know it's strange to say, but I could just feel it staring at me. I tried everything too, talking to it, squeezing my eyes shut, calling for one of the nurses or even my sister, and much more, but in the end I just was alone in that room with this silhouette just standing there. I ended up having to spend the whole night with it staring at me, not being able to sleep or anything. When I finally started to see the sun coming up, it just all of a sudden disappeared. I tried to tell everyone about it, and nobody believed me, saying that it was just a kid's imagination. But even years later, I think about from time to time what happened that night, and I get scared of shadows, things shaped like what I saw those years ago, but I know what I saw. There was somebody there in that room with me that night. Who they were, what they wanted, I don't know, but I'm certain that I saw someone there, standing in the doorframe that night. This happened in South Carolina, and it's one of the worst experiences of my entire life, and I hadn't thought about it for a long time. Someone said that I should write a book of all the horrible things that have happened in my life, because it should be more than a person can handle, but anyway, I was dating a guy for a couple of weeks, and we went to one of his friend's house in the middle of nowhere. It was a sort of run-down older mobile home, but who am I to judge? We went in, and there were 4 other guys there. I thought that was a bit odd. I was the only girl, but just shrugged it off. They wanted to play a drinking game, and back then I was a little wild, so I was game. And after about an hour, things got really weird. I could see them looking at each other like there was an inside joke. I decided to get up and go to the bathroom, and when I came out, someone pushed me in a bedroom and locked the door. It was completely dark in there. I banged on the door telling them that this wasn't funny. The door opened and they all came in and shut the door behind them. I could sort of feel them grabbing at me and laughing. I was fighting and hitting, but they were just way too strong. The door opened and they all left. I could then hear them outside in the hall, and it didn't sound good. They were discussing the order that they would take turns on with me. The door opens and my mind is going a million miles a minute on how I'm going to survive this. The guy comes in and sat on the bed and said that he was going to get me out of there. He said that they went too far and he didn't know that they were going to hurt me. He said that he thought that it was a joke and that there was a back door across from the bedroom, and he said for me to run through the woods as fast as I could to the road and he would come and find me. I ran as fast as I could and I heard them yelling for me to come back. I could hear them coming too. I got to the road and hid behind a tree. It seemed like maybe an hour had passed, and I see a car pull up with him in it, and he is just all bloody from head to toe. They had beat the ever-living daylights out of this guy for letting me go. He had my purse and ended up taking me home, and I didn't know if I should trust him, but really I had no other choice. I mean, I was in the middle of the woods. I heard a couple of months later that apparently that same guy was arrested for killing his girlfriend, and the guy who took me there was arrested for assault of another woman. Maybe if I'd gone to the police, this may have never happened. Who knows? But what I can say for sure is that I got really, really lucky that day. When I met my ex-husband, Kenny, he was from a small town outside of the city. They are what you would call country folks, I guess. The whole family lived on a 1-mile area, and everyone had a plot of land that they built homes on. There were 10 acres each, so when we were married, we got our land on and built a beautiful house on it. My mother-in-law was married to a strange guy, from what I could see. He didn't like to come to family functions and seemed to hate everyone. But he did have a friend named Denny, and when I met Denny, every spidey sense that I had just went off. I did not like this guy, and I think that he could tell that too. He would go on and on about how much money he had, and since he didn't have any family, he was going to leave it to them. He was at their house every day pretty much, except when he would go on these business trips, and no one would hear from him for like weeks at a time. Then he would come back with all of this money and would buy everyone very expensive gifts. Now one day, my ex says that Danny has cancer. Well, of course, I felt bad about disliking him, but still didn't want to be around him or anything. The next thing I know, they have Danny moved in and has a hospital bed set up in the office, which was really strange, but Marilyn, my ex-mother-in-law, said that they needed to take care of him, and in return his life insurance policy of $1 million would go to them. Still, I didn't trust him, so one night I asked some questions. A lot of questions, in fact. Back then, the internet wasn't a big thing and very few cell phones were around. He had answers to every question, but I didn't believe him. So, to win me over, he took Marilyn and I to the cancer ward with him for the treatment. We went into the waiting room and he walked up the stairs. About an hour later, he walks out. He even had some documents talking about his diagnosis. Still, something just wasn't right. He took us to his mother's house. He told us that she died and left the house to him, and no one was supposed to live there, but I saw milk on the counter. Yeah, I'm pretty nosy. He had hundreds of Beanie Babies all over the house too, and gave us a bag full each. This is when they were really expensive too. Still though, I just didn't like the guy. One day he pops up and says that he has to go to Boston for business and wants Gary, my ex's stepfather, to go with him. We didn't think anything about it, so off they go. A couple of days later, Gary calls Marilyn and says that he wants her to come to Boston to sign some papers or something. This all seemed really weird to me, so I decided that I was going to look into Danny. I went to his mother's house and she was home. And apparently, she wasn't dead. She told me that he had escaped from the mental hospital and that they'd been looking for this guy for months. And apparently, this is when he was gone for like weeks at a time. Allegedly, what was happening was that he would go to hospital and then would leave again. Apparently, he wasn't rich either, and he doesn't have cancer. All this had been just an elaborate scheme, I guess, but why? I begged Marilyn not to go to Boston. I had this feeling of dread, but she said that she was going to confront him. A day later, she gets a credit card bill in the mail and her name maxed out. She went to the bank and found out that there were several loans and credit cards taken out in her name. This is where he was getting the money from for the trips and the gifts. They also did a check and she had $1 million life insurance policy on her name. Then, Kenny's younger sister comes to us and says that she woke up in the middle of the night and saw Danny and Gary in the backyard, apparently getting it on, and didn't say anything because she thought that it had just been a dream. So, they were in on it together by the looks of things, and what we were thinking is they tried to get Marilyn to Boston to be killed. She acted like nothing happened when Gary called, and she said that she couldn't get off work and they came home to the police waiting on them. Gary denied everything and acted shocked, and she let him back home. He knew that I was the one who stopped his plan too, and after that, he hated me with a passion. And I guess it just goes to show that no matter how much proof, you always have to trust your gut. Oh, and I talked to my ex-sister-in-law, and Danny, he's now in jail for murder. Because he murdered his lover's wife. So as far as I'm concerned, this was a close call for sure.